Good afternoon, Corey Branch, Chair of our Transit and Transportation Committee. We have 3 items today, so I want to welcome those who are here. Our first item will be the Brookside Drive Safety Initiative, followed by the bicycle lane design and implementation, as well as the last item is dealing with 2-hour limited parking on St. Mary's Street. Before I get started I'm going to start from the bottom. Is there anyone here to speak on the St. Mary Street item? Okay. Is there anyone here to speak on so you're here to speak on the 2-hour parking? So the way I'm going to do this is the comments will be towards that item when that item is being discussed. So is that just one speaker for St. Mary, or is that how many here for the St. Mary 2-hour parking conversation? There will be one speaker. Okay. How many are here for the bike lane design and implementation? 1. And how many are here for the Brookside Drive Safety Initiative? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I'm going to give you all 3 minutes to each. So 3 times 5 is 15. So we're going to give 3 minutes each at the time in order to speak for the item. I will say that I have already talked to staff because we've discussed this item previously. They're going to not go through all of the history, but kind of get to the options. But I do want you to start on mention the safety issue that we're having, and that's what really brought us here is the safety issue. So I want to go ahead and hand it over to. You just go ahead and over to Bradley. All right, Michael.
Yes, sir. We'll hand it over to Bradley Kimbrell from Transportation.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. So Brookside Drive is our first item. We'll jump past a couple of these slides, but to your point, this item was presented last month in this committee. Brookside Drive, north of Glasscock to the Conn Elementary intersection. So this is really the focus of what we've been working on for about 18 months now. So through concerns and inquiries with staff, we noticed, we received feedback about aggressive driving, and that's the safety concern that we're really wanting to address. So this is all due to Conn Elementary's reconfiguration of their site. Originally, the queue backed out onto Brookside about 900 feet. Now it's all internal and only extends about 100 feet on Brookside. This is kind of an indication of what we're seeing from an aggressive driving. And so on Brookside, that extra pavement that was for that right turn is being used for vehicles to speed up and past other vehicles and catch a gap in the traffic before the intersection. So really, from our previous conversation last month, we were requested to pull back some alternatives to the cross-section to utilize that pavement. We have those 3 for us today to look at. One is parking only, one is bike lanes in both directions, and C is parking on one side and bike on the other. So if that's okay, I'm going to jump to the 3. Option A is parking both sides. This is what that picture is really meant to capture. 1 lane of travel in each direction, and then along the curb, we would stripe out that parking lane. How that comes out, pros and cons, that estimated cost is around $2,000. We have been engaging with the community for the better part of 18 months on the parking option. We could deliver that in as little as 45 days. It does create the friction for the vehicles. It does not provide bike infrastructure, and we would have on-street parking in that scenario. Option B is the bike lanes in both directions. Again, 1 lane of travel, and then the buffered bike facilities along the curb. Just going with striping and flexi posts, that cost is coming in around $18,000. To go in with a more substantial buffer with a vertical is over $60,000. This option has not been put to the community, so based off our typical delivery schedule, next year, 2025, would be an engagement phase, and then an estimated delivery of spring of 26. We get the friction, we get bike infrastructure, we do not get on-street parking with option B. Option C utilizes bike lanes in the northbound, that's on the right side, And then on the left side, we would have a parking lane along the curb with a shared lane with the bikes and vehicles. So the cost to option C is around $9,000. With the concrete buffer is around $31,000. Again, same delivery schedule of engagement next year, spring 26 delivery. You get bikes on the right side and parking on the left side, southbound. That's a breakdown of all three. I can come back to this one if we want to look at them comparative. I don't want to steal Barbara's thunder, but she'll be presenting on the schedule of the bike plan update. We're almost in October. They're circled at the bottom. Final recommendations of the study are coming back to you guys in spring of '25. This is the recommendation that staff has, is to move forward with the option A, parking, but also to direct staff to reevaluate after about a 12-month period for parking utilization and what the findings of the bike plan update would be for Brookside. I did put this slide in here just for context. If we were to move forward with option A, establish that parking solid line, then at a time in the future, we could go back in and retro that for bike infrastructure, such as the option B, by adding additional striping. So hopefully I covered a lot of that pretty quick. Any questions that you may have for staff?
Any question from counselors? Because I know we talked about this and discussed this a lot at our last meeting. Thank you all for coming back with, especially the cost estimates that I know we did not have at that time. So what I'm going to do now is open it up for public comment. Please state your name. It's going to be 3 minutes per person to discuss this and provide your input. So,
Is there a slide that's helpful?
yeah, I would say leave it here for right now. I think one group has a presentation when they speak, so I ask those. I don't have all your names, so please come up, and if no one comes up in a reasonable time, we'll move forward.
Yeah, this is the middle of my workday, so I'm happy to get in and out quickly. But I do want to thank staff so much. I know y'all have been working on this really hard. There's been a lot of public input, which I really appreciate. So thank you, staff, and thank you, council members, for having several discussion sessions here. My name is Maggie Sasser. I live on Edmond Street. I live one house back from Brookside and Edmond. And I'm here really for a bit of option C. I think there's some things that we need to consider to make option C even better and a more timely solution to what we're facing, which to your point really is a safety challenge. I think everyone knows this, but it's not just a safety challenge because we have multimodal transit. It's because there are children biking and walking to school every single day, to and from. These are 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds on the road. They are biking with helmets, sometimes with their parents, sometimes not. They are not like defensive adult bikers. These are 6-year-olds. So I do want you to keep that in mind when you're looking about these cost estimates, especially with option C and option B. Yes, there is a huge cost estimate, $9,000 to $32,000. But you have to think about, I hate to say it, you have to think about the kids. You have to think about kids and safety, and you have to think about a concrete buffer is going to be a lot safer from a bike lane protection standpoint when you have a lot of children going to school and biking to school. So please keep that in mind as number one. Number two, I know there's been a lot of conversation about parking, but I really want to kind of center it in housing. We need more housing in the city. I know this is the transit committee, but we need more housing in the city. Yeah, and we're building more, especially in my neighborhood, which I am super, super excited about. With that comes a lot of construction. What we're seeing right now is construction is parking all on Edmond Street because there is no parking on Brookside. I think I sent you all a video this morning of my street. You can barely drive on my street today because there's so much construction parking. I am less worried about parking availability for residents parking, visitors to the new housing units parking. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the near-term need for more parking for construction. If we're gonna incentivize housing and build more housing and make sure that's like an approachable thing that people are gonna accept in our community, we need to think about the disruption that the construction is creating. So from the parking solution, option C and option B, I think is a really great middle ground approach to make sure that we are incentivizing multimodal transit, we're keeping kids safe with a buffered, hopefully concrete barrier, and that there is parking. I know I have 30 seconds, so I'm gonna wrap it up. Two things on the timing. I don't know your process for engaging the community, but I can tell you that Edmond Street has been very engaged over the last year and a half. I've talked to many of my neighbors about this, including as recently as over the last month. We are ready to move forward with a bike lane and parking. I can commit that to you. I don't think there's a need for another year of community engagement on the bike lane or the parking. It just doesn't seem necessary to me. If you feel the need to do engagement on the biking, that's fine. Put the parking in now, put the bike in a year.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Who's next?
Good afternoon, councilors. I'm Brian Thomas with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, and I'm just going to get right to the point. My ask of this committee is to work on developing policy that lets us be more creative and flexible in the solutions that we can deploy. What we found in BPAC, we've heard a lot about Brookside and some about St. Mary's over the last 6 months to a year. It's incredibly easy to put down street parking, on-street parking, but it's very difficult for a myriad of reasons to implement bike lanes and even traffic calming, right? This Brookside is not eligible for traffic calming because it has too many cars, which is completely counterintuitive to me, especially when there is an elementary school on the street. So again, I'm just asking you to start thinking about implementing more flexible policies so that our staff have more options and there are more levers to pull when we have situations like this. In addition to flexible policy, we need to allocate funding behind the policy too, because policy without funding is meaningless. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have, sorry, before I start, I'm not sure how to access the presentation.
There's a presentation.
You submitted the council presentation at Raleigh.
Yep. Oh, I'm not, wait.
Email. If not, I have our desk.
You can't do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it was sent via email to, I think, who did you send it to? To Corey or to Councilor Branch and to Councilor Melton.
Want me to forward it to you?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Okay.
Who did it come from?
I have it.
Other folks can go before.
Did Harry send it?
Yeah.
I'll pull it up.
Which presentations that what?
Singular, council presentation at Raleigh and C.U.
Got it. I'm forwarding it.
You can go ahead while we.
Okay. Yeah, hi, I'm Alex Brissett. I live on Brookside Drive, so obviously I'm very interested in this. One thing I wanted to say, I'll try to make this short. Last time I came to the public comment session and had some pointed comments about, making sure our actions meet our words, and I don't want to miss the fact that the city is doing a good job with bike lanes. I've seen recently there's parking protected lanes on Hillsborough outside of a new construction. The intersection of Peace and Halifax has a very nice bike lane rearrangement. So I am pleased that things are going well. There is a challenge here we're seeing on Brookside. I still want to state with a lot of confidence that if we just go ahead quickly with parking, we will miss the chance to put in the bike lanes we need. With the condos going in, the resistance to removing parking in favor of bike lanes will be, I think, insurmountable. And so we need to take this opportunity now to design something that serves the community, something that is holistic, that we should be looking all the way out to the north end of Brookside. We know that this traffic circle is coming in. There is the opportunity here to design something that serves the entire street, serves the elementary school, serves what is being discussed now, but goes all the way out towards the north end of Brookside. And listening to the comments and seeing all this, I'm reminded of the breakdown in outreach and communication. I mean, we see here the outreach and communication for considering bike lanes is very extended, but for the parking proposal, it happened very quickly. I'm surprised at how engaged Edmond is. Very few people on Brookside itself heard about this project because they're renters or their names are not in whatever database they need to be in to get the letter. I got a letter, but I think, my wife did not, and others on the street did not. So it seems like when it comes to parking projects, the engagement and the standards are much lower, and that is a problem that arises in different scenarios. So, I guess the last thing I would say, I'm pleased to see that there is a consideration for bike lanes here. I think that's best, and I just want to encourage you guys to consider the entire scope of the street and consider that parking, if you put it in, might not come up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking care of that. I appreciate it. Afternoon, y'all. My name's Harry Johnson. I live at 529 Watauga Street, just at the corner of Brookside and Watauga, northwest corner of the cemetery.
I don't think this is your right. This is the one for St. Mary's, isn't it?
It continues. It's right. It's deeper. It's like slide 12.
Did you? There we go. Thank you. Just as additional background, I'm also the vice chair of Oaks and Spokes. I served on the Raleigh BPAC for, I think, 3 or 4 years. I forget how long. Last decade. And I think most notably for purpose of this discussion, we don't live on Brookside. Our older son goes to Conn, and we regularly use that corridor to access that school, along with, I will say, probably more students as a percentage of the enrollment there than any other school in Wake County. You regularly see 40 to 50 bicycles parked outside Conn Elementary School on any given day, including this morning when rain was in the forecast, right? So the usage there is very high, and it's not by, again, adults who are trained to be a defensive driver or a defensive road user. It's small children. And so I want to stress that point. This is kind of history, but I do want to highlight this proposal that Oaks and Spokes has made to council. We've done pilot projects with the city in the past, most notably on Harrington Street and West Street. We also did them on State Street. And essentially, it's tactical urbanism. It's doing a quick install of temporary facilities to test a project, right? And we do the work ourselves in partnership and with the coordination and support of the city. A lot of our board are either engineers or transportation planners ourselves by training or profession. And so we're happy to help provide that support to city council. I think that we want to, and again, I'm speaking a bit more for myself here, not necessarily for the organization as a whole, but I definitely understand and I'm supportive of the concern around construction parking. I definitely see it every day when I drive down there or bike down there. I just want to also highlight that the one bike lane on one side, parking on the other side, doesn't address the core issue of providing safe passage for kids unless you're doing a two-way cycle track on one side. And I haven't taken a look at the city's proposal closely enough to know if there's the road width for that. But I would say that just for myself, in lieu of two protected bike lanes on one side, I would be very supportive of a cycle track on one side and parking on the other. Because I think that addresses the concern of providing bicycle users, especially young children, the ability to safely use that street and avoid conflicts with cars while also providing some parking for older users. So that's all I have on Brookside. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Athena Wallen. I am a Brookside Drive resident. At this point, I just don't know what to say anymore. I believe that consistency is important for communicating to citizens where we should be when we're walking, when we're on a bicycle, when we're driving. And that consistency comes from leadership. And I really, really need our city leadership to lean more into this multimodality future because we're already in it, and the vulnerability of people outside of cars is out on the streets now. We have a mentality change that is really hard to go against. If I am on a bicycle, I don't know if the car behind me hates me just because I'm slowing them down. I don't know if they're going to give me my space when I need to take my lane. And I find that Brookside is obviously very near and dear to my heart, but I also have my own goals and visions for Brookside Drive that require more help from city leadership. Because I want Conn Elementary kids to feel so comfortable leaving that school that they don't have to feel fear when they get to the street of Brookside. One day, I want those kids crossing that street to go explore into the creek. That has been historically not a thing that Conn Elementary students have been able to do. They've been continuously told that they can't ride their bike to a location where their parents can pick them up also on bikes. They are told they can't stand off of the pavement on that sidewalk corner because it's technically not their property and it's a liability. So when we approach the street and we say we want to make it safer, and we don't do anything in front of the school itself, I get a little upset. So I am challenging us now as a combined source of whatever insanity our minds have. Let's start planning for Conn Elementary now, because Brookside is going to be a complete street one day. We're going to complete those sidewalks. We're going to have an expanded safe zone in front of Conn Elementary so students can comfortably move around their space and interact with our world. And that requires leadership to understand the battle we have if we're not in cars.
Thank you. I know since we started and we had speakers, some people did walk in. Is there anyone who walked in who would like to speak on the Brookside issue? Going once, going twice. Okay, this is the last person.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gregory Gideon. I live off of Tryon Road. I'm a single in apartments. My first time speaking before council. So hello, everyone. So I am in favor of option B due to the school being down the street, as the people before me have said before, preferably with a concrete barrier to protect cyclists, more importantly, the children that are commuting to and from school, also from what I've heard from everyone else here and due to the data. But that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to say, and thank you.
All right, thank you. So I want to bring this back to council and to staff. I know it's in the other presentation, but I saw it. So that people know what a concrete buffer looks like, that it's not a big wall, can you show what we use as a concrete buffer?
In the second presentation, I believe.
Yeah, yes, in the second presentation.
Let me see which.
And Councilmember Branch, while he's doing that, I do have to step out here in about 5 minutes. Do we know when Councilmember Jones is arriving? Because I don't want us to miss.
Yeah, she just told me she would be late. Will you be returning?
I will be back, and I guess you could hold votes until I'm back. I probably need to step out for like 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I would just hold a vote until you return.
But if we can get, I have ideas and comments on this item, so I'm trying to get that in before I go.
Okay.
Sure. This is that image, concrete median separating the bike lane and the travel lane.
Okay. So I wanted everyone to see what that looks like, so you know what we're talking about when we say a concrete buffer and we're talking about the flexi posts. You know, And I think it's, I know that second one on this image scares me because, yeah, transportation, I don't think NCDOT will allow that because if a car hits it, it's going to bounce right back off and make things a lot worse.
That bottom photo is
So it's more of the bottom photo as an option as well.
correct, as a more easier to deploy solution because they're typically precast.
Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to show that, so it's part of our conversation. Councilman Melton, you had some comments?
Yes, for this piece, and I'm just gonna speed through these comments. I think if we go with the parking, it will be nearly impossible to ever remove it because people will get used to it, and we do know the challenges we have. And folks often have good intent behind it, but the challenges we have anytime there's a proposal to add a bike lane and remove a parking spot. And so I don't want to put the parking down. If we do that, it's just going to end up being permanent, is my opinion. I could support options B or C. The option C, do we have enough capacity to make it a two-way cycle track, or is there only enough room for it to be one-way?
So we did evaluate a cycle track scenario. There's not enough width to get in a preferred buffer between the travel ways and the cycle track, the two-way. The other challenge is as you approach the intersection, getting the bike in one direction to get it to the other side or get another facility to where, because you wouldn't be able to transition as well.
So my preference, honestly, would be, I think we need more of the concrete protected bike lanes. That should be our new standard, I think. And so as we're looking at opportunities to implement them, this could be a great opportunity to start there or to do an additional one. I wish, though, it could be a two-way cycle track because I dislike the idea that we'd have concrete protection, which is like Class A protection on one side, and then going the other way, you're riding in mixed traffic. Regardless of what is decided, I do not think we need another year of engagement on this. It sounds to me, I would find it shocking that if the engagement was for parking, that these discussions of what are the alternatives and bike lanes has not been at least implicitly involved in those discussions. And so I would not like to see another round of engagement. If we want to do anything, and I feel like I've beaten this drum since I've been sitting here, could we try some tactical urbanism? Like, can we just go ahead and put the bike lanes down and put some interim separation there and let people use them as the form of engagement? If we can do some high impact, low cost pilot of it, I think that would even be better if you don't want to go ahead and make it permanent till you engage more. But my opinion would be, I think we've done enough engagement. Whatever we do, let's just get it done. And I would like to see either option B or C. Ideally, I'd love to see concrete separation with the two-way cycle track if the space will allow. Now I have to step out, and Councilmember Jones is here, so we still have quorum, and I will be back.
No problem. All right. Mr. Johnson, you had a question. Can you come up or an idea? I'm sorry, you had an idea.
Yeah,
Can you show
so
your
I just
idea?
wanted to, going back to the tactical urbanism, the pilot quick build proposal that we included in our presentation. I mean, I think that we would be very happy to work with the city on the actual design. That the one that we put together was admittedly on short notice, and so we were happy to iterate on that to come up with a pilot project that works with y'all and help construct it and put in for part to make it happen quickly.
I'm trying to understand, so how would that help us ultimately? I mean, we would still have to invest in the permanent. It would just give us some more, kind of buy us some time, I guess.
It could. I think what we really do need to think about is the value of the effort for a quick build versus what we're going to actually permanently put in place. And I think Mr. Kimbrell utilized the example of, not to say that we will go this route, but to put parking down, we could come back and add an interior stripe. If we're going to make the investment, we may want to consider just the level of lift that both parts are going to have, and if we wanted to put in the permanent paint now, we could do that as part of the quick, as a not quick build, but some other version of that. We just want to value. We've found that a lot of times some of the quick build projects, particularly when they're, and I think the gentleman, Mr. Johnson, used the Harrington Street. That actually took a lot of time to get the pull together. For something like this, we might find that it's just more expeditious to use a more permanent paint to get started with.
Okay.
So the idea is you put the permanent paint down, that delineates everything until we can go in and put in the more, I say, solid delineation device.
Correct. It may be kind of a balance between the two, where we get, again, some more permanent materials in that are going to hold up and last over a period of time. We can do the evaluation that Mr. Johnson spoke of, and then we can say, what's the next step of the investment that we wanted to make?
Okay. So before I give my thoughts, I want to let you all go first.
Yeah, I just want to say my preference would be for the bike lanes on both sides. I can understand the bike lane on one side and parking on another, but ultimately, I mean, I guess I'm not sure if we want to make parking just for the construction traffic, and then into the future, what is the plan, I guess? Because I did hear what you're saying about that, but that's just kind of my thoughts. Are we trying to do some temporary parking for that? Is that what we want? I don't know. But I would prefer on both sides. I would prefer concrete buffer. But one thing I want to bring up for us to consider is if we move forward with this, then where do the funds come from? And are we pushing any other areas of town kind of down the list that have been selected for these opportunities for protected bike lanes? And is there a way to ensure that we are not, again, pushing any other neighborhoods down that list? Because I don't feel like that's fair.
So I'm going to put a question mark behind your comment and ask staff to respond.
Yeah. So I'll help Bradley out here a little bit. The funds that we have are the funds that we have. So unless we identified another source of funds in the future, we would have to defer something. I don't know what we have on the list and what would be deferred, but the budget that we have for the year is the budget we have.
And my understanding, this was not originally budgeted.
We do have council contingency funds or perhaps other places that we could look to add to the pot. Can I ask about that?
There are other sources. There are potentials for capital reserves, but I don't know what those are yet, and when that should be before you soon. But when we have that opportunity, we can take a look at that.
And also think about this when it comes to council contingency. It is September, and those funds are to only last until June, so we don't know what may come in January or February as well. So we have to be careful how we try to sparse those funds out as well. I saw the walk, so I think there's a comment coming.
I think just to expand upon, we'll use option B as an example. If a flexi post striping solution was pursued, in the nature of that scale, we feel that we could find the funds, move some funds around and be able to make that project happen. As far as concrete buffer, that obviously increases the cost where that would potentially impact an upcoming project. So.
And could we also do, how long do the flexi post buffers last? Like if people don't hit them? If they're not hit, because
Yeah.
what's their lifespan?
Fortunately, we have a few examples that Jake can speak to.
Right.
That's the $64,000 question. We have them throughout the city. In some areas, they get hit, and we're replacing them all the time. Other areas, not as much. My concern here with the proximity of school, unfortunately, school drop-off parents can have very bad behavior, and I don't know if they would be running over the flexi post, dropping off their kids. So I don't have a crystal ball to answer that,
Right.
but it varies greatly.
Okay, because what I'm thinking was flexi post as a short-term solution until you can do the concrete buffers as an option. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, because it is a school zone area.
And if I might, it would give us the opportunity to budget for that more intensive solution, the more permanent and intensive solution. So that as an interim measure would be something that we could probably get down fairly soon. But again, to do something more permanent along those concrete barriers, we would be able to budget for that in future years.
Okay. So I think we've landed on B or C. And I think me personally I would say when this conversation first started, I was a C option. I was all in on C. As I received more information and looking at timeframes, I've looked at B, but I do want to mention, because I want to be completely transparent, I asked staff, and I call it was a nuclear option, and it's not up here, and that was adding a middle turn lane and moving all the traffic to the sides. And the reason why I was looking at that option was because of the number one issue was safety. We have to address the safety issue. And that's why I looked at, I knew parking was going to be a heavy lift, but safety was my number one concern. So with that being said, I'm open to a motion from my council members who are here. Councilor Milton, I know he was coming back, but he's not here. He is excused, absent, while he's not here at the table, to be fair to him. But I'm open to possibly B or C, and I'll avail for a.
I'm just going to ask a quick question, and my apologies for being late, so this may have already been answered, but that safety impact that you're talking about, does B or C address that safety concern? Does staff feel confident that that is a solution that mitigates that safety impact?
Great question. So hopefully on the table, we can represent some of that, but the short answer is yes. All three options do address they reprogram the too wide of the pavement that we have now. And it does create the friction for the traffic. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then to what you were just referencing with your question, what was the response to that with the middle turn lane?
It's an option. It's available. They hadn't priced it out. The thing it does is those who want a parking will be mad, and those who want a bike lanes will be mad. So it's almost a perfect deal because everyone will be mad. But as I noodled on that even further, one of my concerns was adding a middle turn lane. Some people still aren't good stewards of that, and they may take advantage of that. So as I thought about it, that's why I wanted to mention to be transparent, but it's not something I consider a real option anymore.
Great. I think for me, in the last meeting, I was aligned with what you were saying along with safety. So this, having B and C address that safety concern to staff's approval helps me get to being okay with either B or C. So thank you so much.
I'm prepared to make a motion. My motion would be that we move forward for option B with Flexipost buffer, and then keep a lookout for funds for the concrete buffers. Also throw in my motion that we look at additional funds from capital reserves or other places to increase the monies available to these protected bike lanes, because I want this to be a model. Especially being around the school and having so many young people bike. There are many other schools that could benefit from this type of infrastructure, and I want to see how we can build that out and not just have one school in the city be safe for biking.
And I'll be also, I need a second for the motion.
Second.
All right, so the motion probably second. Just one comment I want to make is, what has helped me as well is that I am a father, and I have a young daughter who's in an elementary school. And at her school just the other day, I've seen the queuing of cars. I'm coming around this corner where there's cars parked on the street. Another car was coming opposite direction, and I had no idea what they're going to do because they jumped over to the other side. And so I just stopped before I went forward. I think having this will eliminate concerns and issues on that. So with that being said, I call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed have the same right. Motion carries. Thank you, Raleigh. Thank you, Michael, and Transportation for this.
With respect to the discussion, can I just get clarity as far
Yes,
as
sir.
timing?
So
Option B.
I do think, I will say this. I do believe there needs to be some engagement, but it should not take 12 It should not take more than hopefully 6 months or less to get something down. I know we have to deal with the weather and things of that nature, and then you have to deal with a contractor. So hopefully in the time of preparing all of this, the weather will warm back up where you can put down the first phase of this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So that will be what will be referred out to council, yes.
Okay, so that was going to be my question. Sorry, go ahead. This goes to council,
Yeah,
right?
so this will be referred out to council as the motion for council to make the next vote.
Got it, okay.
All right. Next, we have our bike lane design and implementation plan, and this is an informational item.
Yes, so good afternoon, Council. I'm Barbara Godwin with the Transportation Department. I oversee the Bike and Pedestrian Program. So I'm here as a follow-up for a request for more information on how we design our bike infrastructure. Going to talk a little bit about implementation strategies and enforcement as well. So you'll recall that our team was before you earlier this year to provide an overview of our bike and pedestrian plans. So today's presentation really focuses on what happens once those plans are adopted. So how do we take a line on a map and turn it into a project? So we'll go through a brief refresher of that 2016 plan and talk about the ongoing bike plan update. We'll review sort of what influences our design choices and talk a little bit about challenges and enforcement. We'll talk about some exciting new design and implementation strategies that our program is looking towards. And we'll review different types of projects and the complexities that really influence timelines and engagement for those projects. And then finally, we'll conclude with an overview of some active projects and our vision for the program. So the Bike Raleigh plan was most recently updated in 2016, and really this plan update identified our long-term vision for Raleigh's bike network. It included a 10-year priority plan for implementation, which consisted of 67 total projects for implementation that were prioritized. So this chart really speaks to the progress that we've made since that 2016 plan was adopted. You can see the progress here is broken out in facility types and the status under each of those categories. So we have several that are in design, under construction and completed, and some that are not started yet. So we have a little under a year and a half left in that original implementation timeline, and we'll absolutely incorporate the projects that are not yet started in our active bike plan update to address the path forward for those. Additionally, since 2016, we've been able to partner with other city programs and external agencies to deliver over 100 projects that were identified in our long-term plan. So the corridors that are referenced on this chart here were not identified in that 10-year priority plan, but were really opportunities that we saw through partnerships with other city projects, partnerships with NCDOT projects, and major capital projects. So the 2016 bike plan was very challenging from an implementation standpoint. It didn't 100% factor in feasibility and constructability in that implementation timeline. And we are currently working on addressing those challenges through our active bike and pedestrian plan update. So really the goals of this unified update are to combine engagement and planning efforts for our whole active transportation system. So bike infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, multi-use paths, and of the sort. So we kicked off the plan update earlier this year and really have been working through the data collection of existing conditions phase of work with our consultant team. We held our first kickoff meeting with the steering committee back in August and are gearing up for our second steering committee meeting in October. And we'll be in front of council in the first half of 2025 with recommendations for consideration on this plan. So the next portion of this presentation is going to focus on different types of bike facilities and the factors that influence how design choices are made here. So we'll focus on separated bikeways, conventional bikeways, and neighborhood bikeways. So starting with our separated bikeways. So these typically serve streets with higher motor vehicle volumes and higher speeds. They typically have some form of vertical element like you see here on the right. The example in the top corner is from Northwest Street, where we have those flexible bollards that we were previously discussing with Brookside. And the bottom right example is from Blue Ridge Road, where we had enough right-of-way to get a facility behind the curb and fully protected. So national guidance really suggests that these types of facilities are appropriate on streets with more than 6,000 vehicles per day and speeds that are greater than 25 miles per hour. So our conventional bikeways are typically applied on streets with more moderate vehicular volumes and speeds. So usually anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 vehicles per day with speeds of 25 miles per hour or less. Our toolkit for conventional bikeways is very straightforward. It's really just paint, a stripe line, and some marking symbols. When we do have the available width, we also add in a painted buffer. So this example on the right, and it's a little difficult to see, is from Milburnie Road, but you can see where that striped dedicated facility is. So lastly, our neighborhood bikeways are typically on your more local streets. These connect into existing major thoroughfares and are usually on streets with travel speeds of less than 25 miles per hour and speeds of less than, vehicular volumes of less than 1,500 vehicles per day. So we have a wide variety of tools that we use for our neighborhood bikeway projects, and it really consists of a variety of speed and volume management tools. So everything from speed limit reductions to speed cushions, as you see here in the example, and a combination of signage and pavement markings. And these are a shared space for bikes and cars. So the last few slides have really focused on the data that informs our design and what we should do based on that data. But now we're going to talk a little bit about other factors that influence what we can actually design based on existing conditions. So starting with pavement width. So one of the first things that we look at when we're designing something in-street and more tactical is how much space that we have to work with. USPS mailbox delivery. So these are typically a consideration when we're introducing some type of vertical element in street, and really just a factor that we need to coordinate the design on to make sure that access is maintained at the curb. Driveway spacing, so again, introducing vertical separation in our design becomes a coordination effort here where we just always have to make sure that access to driveways is maintained and that visibility is drawn at those conflict points for bikes and cars to be able to see each other. So solid waste and stormwater, these are really some of those internal coordination pieces that we work towards. With solid waste, we always want to make sure that anything that we design still gives them access to service the streets appropriately. And then again, with stormwater, we always want to design to make sure that drainage and runoff needs are accounted for with any vertical elements. And additionally, we work very closely with our street maintenance partners to ensure that any infrastructure we're introducing interacts well with existing equipment and resources. And then lastly, I'll just quickly touch on other existing curb uses. I could name even more after this, but just some things that are taken into consideration and that we always work to try to find balance on-street parking, loading zones, transit stops. Transit is absolutely a connected piece with our bike infrastructure, and we always want to maintain accessibility at those locations. So our bike network is actively growing and evolving, and our team is working very hard to design out a lot of the conflicts that we're currently facing as it relates to obstructions in bike lanes, such as on-street parking. So this map on the left really gives you an idea on where our downtown parking enforcement team has jurisdiction to issue citations for no parking in bike lanes. The image here on the right gives you a more holistic look at the city, and you can see the lines that are drawn out sporadically on the map. That indicates where we have existing infrastructure. But everything outside of that yellow shaded area is really RPD's jurisdiction. They are mostly a response-based unit based on inquiries and things that they see in the field. They don't have a dedicated parking enforcement unit. So in areas where we have historic on-street parking, such as a lot of our neighborhood, more residential streets, this is where it becomes essential to design bike facilities to deter that illegal parking behavior. And that's really through the introduction of vertical elements in that buffer zone. So the example on the right is from Hardemont Road. This was a street that was resurfaced a few years ago. We were able to design a buffer so that we can go back in and add that vertical element at a later time. But as you can see, the parking that was there before the bike lanes is persisting today. On the right, so this is an example on Pleasant Valley Road, and really this just gives you an idea of where we don't have a ton of enforcement issues. There's a lot of commercial uses around this corridor, and there is a substantial amount of off-street parking. So that's a great way to segue into how we're shifting to pilot new tools and strategies to help address some of those enforcement issues through design. And I know you saw a sneak peek of these in your last presentation, but historically our toolkit for in-street separated bikeways has been limited to flexible bollards, paint, and markings. So as best practices have evolved and more updated and best standards for protected bike infrastructure have been introduced, that really becomes more of a curb-like structure. So we're actually in the process of adding 2 different variations of curb to our toolkit and are actively going to be testing these out on 3 to 5 existing bike corridors over the next year. So that will look like a rubber curb and a concrete curb as some of those new tools, and we're really looking forward to that. Just to touch on some of the benefits of this, and I've kind of hit on these a little bit already, but having that curb-like structure really creates a more enhanced protective environment for cyclists and really achieves that all ages and abilities facility that we're working towards. It also helps deter some of the illegal parking behavior that's currently taking place in our bike facilities, so that's a really great bonus. And then finally, it really does interact well with a lot of our existing maintenance resources, which helps take a little bit of the pressure off of investing in new equipment and resources. So finally, on the innovation piece here, we're really striving to deliver projects in a phased approach. And I heard a lot of commentary that kind of mirrored the strategy that we're working towards today. But really our goal is to start with a flexible design using paint and flexi-posts to help really understand how the road works with this new infrastructure. And then as we learn more and we analyze and evaluate, we come back and add something that's a little more permanent, a rubber curb, a concrete curb, and so on. So this example on the right is from Atlanta, Georgia, and you can see how over time they phased different levels of vertical elements until they landed on their final design. So we've reflected on the design process and how we're working to expand our toolkit and implementation strategies. I want to now focus on different types of projects and how their level of complexity really guides our project management, our engagement, and our delivery timelines. So starting with our high complexity projects, this category really describes facilities that are designed with significant trade-offs, both in-street at the curb and behind the curb. These are typically developed over the course of 1 or more years and include 3 different phases of design and engagement work. So a couple examples of this on the right here. This is Trenton Road and Gorman Street and those connector projects. These were multi-departmental efforts that took place over the course of several years. So our medium complexity projects, these are slightly less impactful in terms of changes at the curb, but they still do account for some significant trade-offs, such as loss of parking or addition of hardscape in street. So They're usually in street with physical infrastructure changes, speed limit changes, reductions, and changes to traffic flow. So a couple examples of this where we introduced speed cushions on Clark Avenue as that kind of hardscape traffic calming element, and then a restriping of Green Road to change the lane configuration. So these typically take up to 1 year of design and engagement work, and really have 2 touch points of design and engagement. So lastly, our low complexity projects. These are pretty simple designs that don't create significant trade-offs at the curb. They usually include a combination of pavement markings, signage, speed limit reductions, and multi-way stop conversions. They can take up to 6 months to 1 year of design and engagement, and they have 1 design and engagement touch point during that time. And again, a couple examples on the right. This is Ingram Drive and Rothgeb Drive. So we currently have about 15 to 20 active bike projects happening all across the city. These are a combination of projects that were recently completed, some that are under construction, some that are in design, and they're really a collaborative effort across multiple departments. Some are being led externally by NCDOT as well, and then we have a few being led directly by the bike program. So in conclusion, I really want to reiterate what our vision is for Raleigh's active transportation network. That being protected facilities for all of our users that connect into meaningful destinations. So think of your parks, your cultural centers, your schools, your businesses. We really want to create that all ages and abilities access to these points throughout the city. And we've got some great examples of how this is already happening through projects like BRT and Lake Wheeler Road and Blue Ridge Road up on the screen here. So as we work to kind of expand the reality of this vision, we have a lot of catalytic projects on the horizon in this area through high-speed rail, again, BRT, and just really want to drive home that this is what we're working towards. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Can you go back to the slide, like 2 slides ago, and it had the picture of the projects? I'm wondering, because Grove Barton, in my district, there's a lot beyond that. So this isn't the full city. Are there, in the northernmost parts of our city, bike projects that are in the works?
So none that come to mind at this point. We can go back and just make sure that through other efforts, not being led directly by our program, that there are not active projects there, or there are active projects there, but we can follow up.
Thank you. I appreciate it, because I'm really excited about the partnership with BRT, but as I'll mention again, BRT doesn't touch my district, and my district goes all the way up past the airport. We have Briar Creek, which is one of the highest density areas there, that I think would benefit from some projects so that we can make it easier for them to get around. They don't have bus options down here other than the 70X. You know, there's a lot that could be desired, and I only know that for Briar Creek, so I'm trying to think of the Triangle Town Center as well. You know, if we don't give them options, then how are we providing equity for all of our residents? So that would just be, if you can look into that, I'd love to get an update. Sure. Thank you.
Earlier, there was just one person who raised their hand for a comment, but I saw he left. Are you speaking? Okay, so you have 3 minutes. You can come forward and speak at this time. Yeah, if we can go to that last part. Which presentation?
The one that Mr. Johnson was using earlier.
Okay.
That's right. Yes. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go down to where I need to be. Okay. So what you're going to find from our coming here is really no different, and it's really echoing what transportation has just presented to you. Just as we come into the close of the current bike plan and then getting ready to prior that next one, we just want to bring out some of the comment that we keep on hearing as we go out there and into the public and talking with doing our engagement, which is that number one, doing prioritizations when you create this plan, these big plan, really can't really predict how world are going to change, how street are going to change in the next 5 years and 10 years. So let's use the prioritizations somewhat of a guideline instead of as a solid rule, because I think we continue to hear that there's a lot of projects that we're being really leaving on the table because they are not really prioritized that high enough. For example, a couple of projects that we're going to talk about today kind of fall into that kind of category. So that's really one thing we would like to touch on as we move into the next one. And also really just driving that point, as I was saying earlier, that if there's active transportation project that's already happening, and then there is something that the bike lane, the previous one, also the next one, it's already recommended, let's not leave that opportunity on the table. Let's see if we can somehow fit all those things in together. And then next, really just, if you build active transportation infrastructure, people are going to use it. In fact, as it touched on earlier, people are already using it now. People are already biking down Brookside Drive. People are already biking down St. Mary's Street. And if we can also look into how not just implement these projects, but also figure out how to protect it and how to come back and maintain it. Because while we continue to see that it's great that the city continue to build these infrastructures for us, but as you can see, some of these conditions are really not conducive to safe travel, both for us as a cyclist, pedestrian, or in some cases you can see even for vehicle. So and that brings us also into when we think about doing project implementation, let's also perhaps think about maintenance when we implement these projects. 6 months down the road, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, let's think about also including those into the cost and how much we need to not just implement, but also protect it and maintain it to going forward. And then this one last slide here really just emphasize the point. Protection is protection. Line on the road is not protections. So that's all we have for this sections right now.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments on this one? All right, last one.
Hi, Jared Harbor, Executive Director of Oaks and Spokes. I have lived in Raleigh for 28 years, and I've been a cyclist. Preferred way of transportation has been by my bike for probably 16, 17 years of that time. Being the Executive Director of Oaks and Spokes, we have actually over 500 members, and I also co-founded and co-owned a local bike shop here in Raleigh for almost a decade, and so I have communicated with thousands of cyclists in Raleigh, and number one concern for riding in Raleigh is safety, and the number one plan of action, which most cyclists, people on bikes, for whatever reason that is, to get to there with our current network is encouraging from leadership to have cars out of the bike lane. So when I first started riding in downtown Raleigh, there was none of that. When I started seeing just painted bike lanes, it was very exciting. But now, a lot of those just single line painted bike lanes are just filled with parking. And we have federal vehicles, we have state vehicles, we have county vehicles, and we have city vehicles parked in those bike lanes. So I think the easiest and best thing you can do right now is to do something to kind of eliminate that, and then moving forward with some of these suggestions, future bike lanes, future infrastructure have that delineation to kind of keep that from occurring, because I know resources are tight, and so something in the interim where the council can approve a budget item to hire a staff member to enforce that. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Bring it back to council. I do know we have one captain here to talk about enforcement. Can you speak to enforcement and how you all can and what you need?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Captain Van Antwerp. I'm the Downtown District Commander with the Raleigh Police Department. And I was asked to take a look at and speak very briefly on enforcement as it relates to bike lanes and folks who are parking in bike lanes. So first, I'll tell you that I too like to ride my bike and utilize the bike lanes. I think it's a great value add for our transportation in the city of Raleigh. I've also experienced myself riding in a bike lane, feeling like I've got this great path, and all of a sudden I've got to bump out into traffic to get around a parked car. That's very frustrating, so I share your frustration as well. We do have a city ordinance against parking in a bicycle lane. It is a ticketable offense, a $50 offense, and then obviously with a $200 penalty if there is an enhancement where it's anywhere near a handicap zone. We are looking at these on a case-by-case basis, and most of the time with regard to bike lane violations, it has been driven by complaints. So most often that's how it comes across our plate is by nature of a citizen complaint. Aside from that, I don't think that we have historically done aggressive towing for parking in those bike lanes. That's just not been the course of action. I think it has to be considered that we've got a population of 500,000 people with 750 Raleigh police officers. If we do tow a vehicle in the case of a scenario where there is a bike lane violation, we're talking about putting a police officer on scene until a tow truck gets there. We're talking about a real drain on personnel in a situation like that. But we are serious about enforcing, and we do enforce when those violations are seen.
Okay, thank you. I have one quick question before I go to council members. One big issue that's brought up, especially in the downtown area, is on Sundays.
Yes.
We have quite a few churches, and I know they lost parking due to bike lanes. Where's that balance, and where does the law fit into Sunday parking and for church and the bike lanes being blocked?
So certainly that is a challenge. So we have a massive influx of churchgoers on Sunday mornings, and historically in the city, and especially in the downtown area where we've got churches within a stone's throw of where we're standing today, we have made some exceptions on Sundays for folks parking, and for good reason. I think we've got a pretty large number of elderly population that are coming in to go to church on Sunday who we would prefer not to have to traverse several blocks to make it to church. So I do think there needs to be a balance struck there, maybe some public education, and we can certainly, through our community squads, work toward finding some common ground there, from an empathic perspective, to make sure that they're understanding that we do need to share the road, so to speak, and perhaps work towards some alternate parking for those folks in the downtown area on Sundays.
Okay, which leads me to our staff, because I think is Sundays and then funerals, I think is another conflict. If we can maybe have staff work with our partners at maybe Oaks and Spokes in the community to try to figure out how we can educate and how we can better partner and understanding, because I think, when it comes to, Sunday, because I don't think we have any churches that have service on Saturday. We may have a few that have churches on Saturday. But finding that balance between the worship and the writing, I think from an educational standpoint first, and then we can kind of go from there, I think would be very beneficial. Okay.
And we would certainly be willing as well, with the police department to host some, or to sort of proctor some conversational sessions where we could bring some members from both of those communities, and I'm sure that there's much overlap there as well, that members of our cycling community are also members of our church-going community, but to have some open conversation so that it's preemptive rather than reactive, if that makes sense.
So Michael, we have our first host for the meeting.
Duly noted.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Open up for council here, then here. We'll just go down the line. We'll start with our Mayor Pro Tem.
One thing as a follow-up on the enforcement piece, I think it could be helpful if we could get data on how many citations are being written for folks parked in bike lanes. We could get that just as a manager's update. I would like to see how often we are writing citations, and also helps us explain to folks that there is enforcement is happening. And I think if we can make that more regular, word will spread. If you park here, you get a $50 ticket, and maybe folks will think twice about it. The other piece that I see a lot, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I believe the number is about 100, we've written about 170 tickets in the downtown area in this past year.
Okay. And then the other piece is a lot of times it's like government vehicles parked in the downtown bike lanes. And if there can be, I don't want to call anybody out, but certainly we should have no City of Raleigh vehicles parked in bike lanes. And if we could also try to do some outreach to our partners with this at the state and the county, and a reminder there are 2 areas that are just constantly clogged with government vehicles: in front of the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court building, and in front of the Wake County Justice Center between the courthouse. And so, well, I didn't say who, which vehicles. You can go on Oaks and Spokes' Twitter and see it. But I do think if we can write citations to the private sector and do a round of nudging with the public sector, that could be helpful too. There's very little right-of-way space dedicated to non-car infrastructure. And then when the little bit we have is then taken up by vehicles, it's tough. It's not just cyclists. I ride my scooter. I think everybody knows that. And it's hard when I have to bump out into traffic. It doesn't feel safe. I wear a helmet and stuff. I think about people on their bunch bikes and they've got kids in the back, and that's precious cargo. And we can't be pushing them out into traffic. So.
This is an enforcement question, so I'm not sure if I can get the police back up here. Captain, can I ask you a really quick question? In terms of enforcement and different ideas of what to do, I know we just started our civilian traffic unit.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what off the bat, and if it's wrong, you can bat it down. Is there a space for assistance with that unit so that we don't have to always rely on police, but we could use the structures that we've already built?
So that would be an out-of-the-box thought process to utilize that civilian group. Right now, that civilian group is tasked with working traffic crashes, pretty much specifically, and by design. They are trying to release the load off of the sworn officers in that scenario. As for having them enforce ordinances, I don't even think we've looked at that. So, and I think we'd have probably some issues to talk with legal about with that regard.
Yeah, I think because they're not sworn officers, I don't think they can do citations. But at the same time, our parking, let me ask the question this way. Downtown parking enforcement, they can write a fine for those tickets, correct?
That is correct.
For parking. So that may be a way to
I just thought of it. So it's a brand new idea that I don't even know it will work, but I'm just thinking if there's a towing question where we're saying, I don't want the police officers to stand there for the towing, then if we had a civilian traffic unit that could do that instead of an officer so they can go on, is that a possible solution so that we can do multi-pronged efforts to combat, making sure people don't park in the
right, and that's a great question, and we are constantly evaluating ways that civilian entities can help with some of the lift that we've been, embarking on, since the time I've been here, and I think we've made some great strides there. One point to be considered with regard to violations, again, enforcement on Sundays, is that there actually is a provision in city code for Sunday parking. So in addition to our enforcement actions and our, with the police department, the way that we look at those enforcement actions, there would actually have to be a lift on the part of the council to renegotiate that and look at that again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I had a feeling that was there. That's why I wanted that conversation.
Yes, sir.
Councilman.
Just to follow up on enforcement, I'm curious of the tickets that were written, are there any hot spots or areas where you all notice or just continual problem areas?
So we can pull those numbers through the crime analyst to see exactly out of those, did we say 147 or 174? I may be transcribing those
About
numbers.
170 is what I recall.
We can take a look and put those on a heat map to be able to see exactly where we're having the majority of that difficulty. And I will say, from the perspective of public vehicles, police vehicles that fall within my purview, I will certainly make sure that we have some public education. I have to take ownership of that. I'd also have to remind us that there are times when our officers are parking for emergency calls, especially in the core business district, where they are finding a place to park relatively quickly to dispatch to a call.
Yeah, I think, for emergency situation, I don't think anyone has any issues there because you're responding to a call. But I think it's just a car just parked.
Absolutely.
Yep. Randomly is the concern. Because, as we know, we have some cars, some agencies, they park in bike lanes and on sidewalks.
Yeah, and just to continue, if there are any hotspot areas, I'd like to see those areas just be patrolled regularly if we know, there's always a problem in this particular bike lane. And maybe that would reduce some of the, just the idea that we've got to be everywhere at once, because there are a lot of bike lanes that I don't have any problems with. But I know there are others that are tougher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've heard some things today that really do help me as well to sort of humanize this issue. When we start talking about kids riding their bicycles in front of a school, I have an 11-year-old boy, so that starts to hit a little bit closer to home. I think that may be a great tactic in some of the public education pieces, just to really humanize it, and I will certainly share that with my team.
Great, thank you. I have a couple more questions, but not for enforcement. Can we go back to the final slide that Oaks and Spokes had? There were a couple different requests there that I just want to discuss as a committee. The first request was about delineators and adding those, to our existing bike lanes. And I'm curious, I guess maybe to Michael, what kind of budget that would require. Could that be a recommendation from this committee for a budget note? I don't know what that would look like.
I would ask that we have a moment to maybe quantify that for you,
Okay.
and we can maybe report that back out in a manager's update on a Friday.
That'd be great.
That way, we just know if we're talking about $2 or $2,000 or $2 million. So,
Exactly.
all
Thank
right,
you.
thanks.
Okay. I like that idea. And then a couple other items I just, again, curious more about. So the bike lane cleaning, what do you see as needs there, Michael, or anyone with your team?
Yeah, so folks may know that we had bought a couple of pieces of specialized equipment. One of those was severely damaged in an incident.
Did a car drive into it?
No, someone took it. And then crashed it. So we're looking at trying to see what other options are to be able to help with some of that. But our staff do try to make sure that they're doing like regular cleanings on those lanes. We know particularly in like spring and fall, those are times when debris drop from trees, things like that, make some of the bike lanes particularly difficult to use. So
Would extra personnel help? I mean, is it personnel or is it equipment?
it's both.
It's both. Okay. So I guess that's just something to be aware of for this committee, potentially for a budget note. And then I also saw, let's see, staff position for bike lane parking and sidewalk obstruction enforcement. So that's back to enforcement. So that's really on RPD's side. And the final, transportation safety goals to... Okay, and I think that really just goes back to broader policy, number 4. Okay, making sure I read all of those.
Yeah, and number 4 also speaks kind of to what we were talking about with Brookside, but also what we'll be talking about with St. Mary's and the parking right there, which is also a school zone. So.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention too is keep in mind on slide 11 of the presentation, factors that influence design. That's something that we do have to keep in mind when we talk about putting up, devices, delineators, because not all streets are cut equally. So when you look at driveways and the spacing and things of that nature, I think we have to keep that in mind as we're moving forward. So I definitely, where we have streets that are more thoroughfare-ish, it makes a lot more sense. But when we start coming to our communities, we have to really keep in mind, because I can imagine how many people, in these communities love Amazon, and that means they need those packages delivered. And then that goes back to us having to replace these devices, because not all delivery drivers are equal either. So something I definitely want to keep in mind. Again, this item was for information purposes, for further discussion. If there's nothing else left here, I'll move to our third and, let me say this. Is there a motion to report this out as being received for information? It's been moved and properly second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed have the same right. Motion carries unanimously. And so now we will go to our last item, St. Mary's, 2-hour parking.
All right, good afternoon again. So St. Mary's Street parking expansion, this item was set to go to consent in August, and today we have a little bit more information for you. So what the proposed consent item was to extend the existing on-street parking shown in green. We're going to extend it to provide 5 additional spaces. So just extend it up St. Mary's toward Brooklyn. That the existing parking's been there for a couple decades, and we were going to extend 5 spaces to support the businesses and continue to create that friction for that travel lane as you head north on St. Mary's. Here's a view of what it looks like. St. Mary's, and we'll expand on this in a moment, was recently resurfaced with a separated bike facility on the left. And then the green shown here is that existing parking zone. The blue highlighted shows what the extension of that parking would be. So somewhat busy slide, but just wanted to capture the bike network changes in this space. So along St. Mary's that was just resurfaced, Barbara, and she just said it, it is opportunistic for us to get bike infrastructure where we can, and through that resurfacing operation, we were fortunate to be able to get in the buffered bike facilities in that pink dashed area. As those facilities approach those signals on the north end at Wade and on the south end at Peace, we again drop those separated facilities into the shared lane configuration. And you can see those cross sections for reference. One thing I would like to point out is how Boylan Avenue today has that shared lane configuration. And as you go across Peace, Barbara's team is working to put together the continuation of that up Boylan and then over through Brooklyn to tie into the separated facility that was recently put in at Brooklyn and St. Mary's. So again, for our view, our reference here, the existing parking shown in blue across from Broughton, and then the proposal for the agenda item was to extend that into that blue section, about 5 spaces. So again, that's really what this item was on your agenda. Hopefully that provides a little bit more information. What questions do you have for staff?
I don't remember why this was pulled. I used this recently, and the new bike lanes I very much appreciated. And then I also used I diverted down Brooklyn and then Boylan there to avoid the intersection at Peace. Do we have folks that are people talking?
I think council members had questions.
I just wanted to note why it was pulled.
I didn't pull it.
I pulled it, and so it was to just have this conversation in alignment with the overall, when do we put in bike lanes and not, because there were some decisions made on this road that residents had questions about. I will say I've also biked this, and I have a sense of the area. I have a sense of the business needs. There are businesses that really rely on the parking on the street, and so I think that is why we have this recommendation to add some extra parking, and there already is parking on this block. So it's not that we're removing bike parking, but we've added a lot of bike parking. We're just keeping one block for parking because of the needs. And when I've biked around there, I do see a lot of cars they're looking for a spot. It is tough right there.
Okay. So I do know we had a hand raised to speak to this. So 3 minutes.
the presentation back one more time. Thank you very much. So let me go all the way back up to the top. Sorry, it was arranged a little differently. So I'm really here to give you a on-street look of what has been happening. So as you can see, that on August 24th, the St. Mary's Street has begun to be resurfaced. Looks very nice right here. This is standing right in front of Brown High School. On the September 9th, this is what council member has referred to, the protected bike lane right up there. This is going northbound if you were standing right along the sidewalk here along Fletcher Park. And there's also a line that was also a line that was painted in between Brooklyn and Peace. That's what this pictures is show you. It was really unclear whether that was supposed to be a bike lane or park lane. It's just really unclear. And what did make clear was I don't think it was intentional to be put there. So the very next day, it was removed. So as you can see, that's what's currently happening in these pictures. And a couple of days right after the line is removed, you can see there's a traffic infraction happening. If you can see right there, that sign right behind the white car, that's the current sign that shows that no parking beyond this place. So what has occurred right here is where the proposed additional the proposed on-street parking is going to happen. So as you add parking spaces, this is what you potentially be looking at right along this corridor. And just to give a little counterpoint here, yes, we understand that business definitely need visitors and visitors need parking, but we're here showing some evidence that the local business right along this route here, they do seem to have plenty of ample parking. This is really taken during daytime where business would have happened for these businesses. You can see most of these parking spaces are currently left unused. And we cannot be a bicycle advocacy without advocating for bike lane, which is really just going back to the original designs, which is why we didn't advocate for bike lane in the section between Peace and Brooklyn. Echoing what council member Corey was saying earlier, if you have a two-way bike lane or bike lane on both sides, and then you had to immediately shift to just one side earlier, it creates frictions, and then that's what is currently being proposed to do. So that's really just it, and also just understanding the sections between Peace and Brooklyn where you only propose protected on one side. That is also another school zone, that is Brown High School. So that's really, we're here to present just a little bit on street facts of what is going to happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who?
Hey, Brian Thomas again with VPAC. And I think I asked Councilor Harrison to pull this. Initially, bike lanes were proposed on the east side of St. Mary's as well. And so this looked like kind of almost like a bait and switch thing, like all of a sudden you're not getting the bike lanes and we're adding parking. And so I wanted to kind of get more information on that. And I also question whether or not adding on-street parking is appropriate for a consent agenda item, particularly, as the city sees more dense development patterns. And we've talked about today already about how difficult it is to remove parking once it's laid down. So I have followed up with staff, and they have given me some background on this, that some of the businesses, apparently really rely on that on-street parking. But I also know that there are changes going on with some of those businesses as well. So just to give some background on why I asked Councilor Harrison to pull this as well.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful.
That meeting feels like forever ago. I forgot.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could hear from staff to talk about that decision and just what feedback you heard from the businesses. I will say again, from my perspective, when I've ridden around in the middle of the day, I've seen a lot of the lots very full and people struggling to find parking. So I am concerned about that, but I also appreciate y'all bringing this up because it's helpful for us to really think about this. And again, we are at a school. So I'm glad that there is going to be this bike lane on the school side.
Absolutely. So when the city identified that St. Mary's was going to be resurfaced, the team in transportation kind of put together some concepts to be able to put forward some bike infrastructure. Really, before getting into the final design, we went to the public and did some outreach, some engagement, and some of the feedback we received was from those businesses who obviously emphasized the importance of their existing spaces and then asked for additional. And so through those conversations and just acknowledging that, that within the scope of resurfacing, we would not be able to get protected bike infrastructure all the way to the signals and on at Wade and Peace, ultimately felt that this option that you see here would be the best to be able to provide that. The shared solution, the shared lane configuration is still in place along that northbound side, and we're able to maintain those parking spaces for businesses.
Okay. So I have a question, trying to connect the two since it was brought up in the comments. Currently on Brookside, isn't that no parking?
On Brookside?
Mm-hmm.
It's restricted. It's
On
restricted.
the restricted. Okay. So, but on average, it's usually no cars there because that's why we were talking about adding parking. Right.
Yes, we do know there are some. We don't have a
Right.
sense of the quantity there.
Yeah, I want to differentiate the two here because here, as you're coming up, there is already existing parking. And I think this is just 5 more spaces in addition to what's already there. And then the bike lane is added the rest of the way. So for me, I feel comfortable with this, but I'm bringing this back to council. And then, Michael, did you have comments you wanted to make?
Just one thing, I do want to commend staff. This is, as people have noted, a school zone. And I don't want folks to overlook in this diagram the 2 little blue bars that cross the street. So two incidents where we've provided raised crosswalks. The gentleman from Oaks and Spokes had a photograph of that installation going in, but these are like tabletop crosswalks that actually help to slow the traffic. And I think these may be the first 2 that we've implemented in the city. So I don't want that innovation to be overlooked as we have the conversation, because we do recognize the importance of safety right here. And we do have a lot of folks who park over around Fletcher Park and then walk over to Broughton.
And over time, this is something that we can possibly implement across the city as well.
We're actually working on a number of locations as we speak for downtown, for some of our mid-blocks where those crossings are particularly difficult for pedestrians. So we're looking at a number of those as we talk today.
Okay, thank you. All right, council, any questions, or is there a motion from any council members on how to proceed here?
Well, I'll say my bias is always bike lanes, but I am going to make a motion to continue with the staff's recommendation around the parking, because I've heard directly from those businesses, and I do think they have a need here.
All right, it's been moved and properly second. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed have the same right. Motion carries unanimously. These will all be referred out. All 3 items will be referred out to City Council Tuesday, if staff can turn it around fast enough in 3 days. Do we need to wait until?
I believe the agenda goes live today.
It goes live in about 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think we may miss that deadline, but we'll get it right after that.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I will put it in the hands of the clerk. I will be ready to present this out on Thursday if the clerk's office is, and if they're prepared. With that said, that concludes all items under Transit and Transportation Committee. And I don't think we hopefully have any more meetings this year, just based on turnover that I see coming forth in our city. With that being said, we are adjourned.